Empiricism, John Locke. History and Systems of Psychology, Professor Michael Botwin, Department of Psychology, California State University, Fresno. John Locke lived in tumultuous times in English history, with the execution of King Charles I and then the subsequent English Civil Wars. He was a Puritan whose first publication was a poem written to honor Oliver Cromwell, the Puritan military leader. Now, Locke spent most of his time at Oxford University. He taught a variety of subjects and wrote a variety of books, including children's books, and helped Robert Boyle edit his book on the nature of air. He was a friend of Newton and corresponded with him regularly, but primarily on theological matters. Now, Locke is one of my favorite empiricists, if not my favorite of all the empiricists. He starts off with the idea that abilities come from experience. In other words, everything is learned. Locke makes the case that all knowledge is empirically derived. Now, empirically means through the senses for him, and there are no innate ideas. This is about as anti-Plato as you can get, right? For Locke, everything comes externally. His most famous idea is the mind was a blank piece of paper upon which all experiences are written. It's also been called the tabula rasa. So our mind, according to Locke, as an empiricist, is simply the sum total of all our experiences throughout our lifetime. Now, in terms of cognitive experience, Locke believed that the mind processes sensations and sensory experiences or reflects on previous stimulations. Ideas to Locke come from thinking about experience, and the ability to process the information, to think about things, is innate, according to Locke. So the processing happens in the brain, in the mind, but all of the sensations come external in Locke's system. Now, one of the notions that the empiricist and many of the other philosophers at the time had to deal with was, how do we form these complex ideas if our minds are simply a collection of experiences? Well, here's how Locke solved this problem. He believed that ideas were either simple, could not be reduced in any further way, or complex. And complex ideas are simply composites of simple ideas. So if you think about going into a bakery and looking at the things in the case, and you have the sights and the smell and everything else going on in the bakery experience, and you get the composite, the complex idea of what is a good tasting baked good. Now, you've seen these before. Locke talks about primary and secondary qualities. And for Locke, primary qualities are things like shape, weight, solidity, mobility, the same type of things Galileo talks about. Locke's secondary qualities are products that are perceived by the perceiver of some object. And they again include things that are common to Galileo's secondary qualities: taste, smell, color, and sound. In his paradox of the basins, he demonstrated the subjective nature of experiences. So, I love this paradox of the basins. I think it's a very cool example. Locke takes 3 bowls of water. One is hot, one is cold, one is room temperature. He places the hot and cold bowls on either side of him and puts the room temp bowl in the middle. Then he places both hands into the hot bowl and the cold bowl of water and lets them acclimate. After a couple of minutes, he takes them out, moves them over, plunges them into the center bowl, the bowl at room temperature. Now, simultaneously, Locke received the sensations of, wow, this water is cold from the hand that was in the hot water, and this water is warm from the water that was, from the hand, that was in the water that was cold. So an individual can have conflicting sensations at the same time. Very interesting idea. Now, John Locke is important for us in one other way. Locke did not believe in anything innate. And in Locke's time, it was believed that kings had divine rights. They were born with some characteristics given to them by God that in turn gave them the bona fide to rule a country. Well, if you believe the mind is a blank slate and a tabula rasa, and everything is learned, then everyone starts with relatively the same blank slate. Now, we all have different experiences on our blank slates based on what we've done, where we've lived, our family, education. You can imagine the raft of variables. But even a king starts with a blank slate and nothing special. Hence, Locke early on, and Locke was a very political man, he was always interested in politics, took on the notion that at least to start, all people are created equal. And the differences come out through our education, through our learning, and things like that. Later, John Watson would turn it into a very famous statement for behaviorism. But if you look at John Locke's work, especially some of his political and moral work, you'll see that it was extremely influential on the founding fathers of this country, and that many of Locke's ideas are in our Bill of Rights and our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence. So he was a major he was a major influence on the founding fathers. Wow. I'm going to go soak my head for a while, contemplate this blank slate stuff. We'll see you next time in the history of psychology. This has been a We Have Couches video production. Copyright 2020, Professor Michael Botwin. All rights reserved.